Good evening, everybody, which also includes afternoon here in California, where I'm joining from. So my name is Seicho. I'm one of the senior students. And you might notice that I am not our priorly scheduled speaker, Fugan Hoshi, who unexpectedly was unable to join today. So word went out, and here I am, and delighted to be together this way, and also to enact just in that whole unexpected situation. This is what we do, mutual support, meeting the moment, and here we are. Everything's included. And that really bridges to what I'd like to explore together today, which is the power of the bodhisattva. And even as I say that, I can hear myself a kind of nudging, from almost from behind, like the ancestors are reminding bodhisattvas, because the bodhisattva is also the whole, and the way the whole expresses itself is also in our individuality. So as bodhisattvas, what is this power? What is it that we're doing? And fortunately, our study text for this Ango, Shodoka, offers us not only clues, but also cues as to what that is. And one of the things that's been really a delight for me is revisiting this really prose poem, or as it's sometimes translated as the Song of Enlightenment, because about a decade ago, it was our Ango text when I was Shuso. And that's the way it is, all our texts come around. You stick around long enough and we're studying it again. Isn't that wonderful? And now Hango and all our teachers are shining new light on it. Actually, we all are. And that light is the power of the Dharma. So what is that? Well, one of the things that's been fascinating to me for a while now, in revisiting our ancestral teachings, is that when I first came to them, I was thinking of them as timeless truths that have been passed down to us. So I didn't necessarily put any kind of prioritization for the context of those teachings, particularly cultural context, like what was happening in their surroundings, what were the values of that time and place, communities, what was going on in, so to speak, the climate, the natural world, urban, rural, all kinds of considerations like that. I just tended to come to them as just this timeless truth, as if it was sort of hanging in midair, And now when I revisit it, and turns out revisiting this particular song is that I can't help but attune to the cultural context, even if some of it I'm coming to from imagination based on what I've read or gleaned or heard. And of course, the reason that that's coming up is because I'm I'm very motivated in terms of how it relates to our cultural context right now, which there's a lot going on, right? So one of the contexts that's interesting to me is that the culture of having these Chan or Zen teachings that emerged in this same era as the one we're studying, more or less. There may be some centuries involved, I'm not exactly sure. Only because I only started preparing yesterday. So, and the advantage of that is that you can only work with the time that you have, right? I mean, anybody who's crammed to do anything has a sense of that. And you have to let go and just what's there. And one of the things that came up for me was, oh, right, song. So there's the song of the jewel mirror samadhi, right, which we chant during sesshin a lot. And there's Hakuin's song of zazen. There's Shitu's song of the grass hut. Right? So there was something already in the expression of that culture that valued how it saw a song or heard a song, which might be a little different than what I might think of as song in our era. And yet, one of the things that I noticed differently in coming to Shodoka was this sense of, it's kind of long. And right from the first line, there's this sense of wandering within it. And so what happened for me yesterday as I was doing this, again, this natural inclination was just to lightly brush through it. And then you've probably had this experience in one read or another, or maybe even listening to a song that just without trying, something pops, something just lands. And particularly you can feel it in the body. And you might not really understand exactly why, but it stops you, in a helpful way. And then if we're lucky, we get curious about it and explore it. It's kind of like a light touch. And that happened for me. And this was the verse that stopped me. It speaks in silence. In speech, you hear its silence. The great way has opened, and there are no obstacles. If someone asks, what is your sect? And how do you understand it? I reply, the power of tremendous prajna. So what if we just listen to that again and just notice where in your body it lands. And it might land as ease, but it might land as a kind of creative tension, which is equally interesting, I think. So here we go. It speaks in silence. In speech, you hear its silence. The great way has opened and there are no obstacles. If someone asks, what is your sect and how do you understand it? I reply, the power of tremendous prajna. And it's interesting that it leads with silence, interwoven with speech. It reminds me of something, a question I asked Roshi, Enkyo. We have so many Roshis to say that. Or I like sometimes how she says, Roshi-e. That years ago, when we were first starting, on the other side of this Ango, we have urban sesshin, that at some point during the day, we were going to go out into the urban environment. We could do this in person. And so I asked her, well, how are we going to maintain silence? I mean, we're going to step out into the whole marketplace just coming right at you. How are we going to do that? And she said something like, we always maintain inner silence. And sometimes inner silence is outer silence, like often when we're in the Zendo. But it also includes, and now I'm lapsing into how it landed with me, not literally what she might have said, right? Which is sometimes it just expresses itself as what's called for in the moment, which includes speech. So what we flow with, what our expression really is expressing that inner silence in a way that's appropriate to the moment. Really helpful. And as usual, really practical, immediate. And so when I read this line, it speaks in silence, and speech you hear its silence. That's what that's how I hear it right now, which is helpful because, like you, I need to, when we're done here, be able to meet the next thing, which, unexpected, whatever it might be. And then at the close of this phrase, it's really interesting because it says, if someone asks, what is your sect? How do you understand it? I reply, the power of tremendous prajna. And it's really interesting that that's not translated here. How come? Well, we have a tradition of doing that too. We don't always translate samadhi. We don't actually always translate prajna, like in the Heart Sutra that we chant all the time. And what that does is that, you chant it over and over again, not quite sure what that is, and yet something comes forward, as we're chanting together, as we're really studying that through repetitive saying it. Well, another thing that I've come around to is, it is translated, of course, in different ways. Some people translate it as wisdom or wisdom beyond wisdom, or Thich Nhat Hanh translates it as understanding. So his translation, for instance, of the Heart Sutra is the heart of understanding. Interesting. But really, the Heart Sutra itself, the Prajna Paramita, is really the pithy synthesis of this massive collection of Mahayana expression called the Prajna Paramita Sutras. And, you got to wonder, why so much? And also, how so pithy? You might, as I have, when you're chanting the Heart Sutra, think, wow, it's a long sutra. It's like, what the heck, but actually it's incredibly pithy and direct. And what's important here is that this wisdom or this understanding, it's not just some kind of, yeah, let's understand, or yeah, there's this wisdom. There's just this wisdom of the universe. It's actually, I mean, you could say that, but really what that is expressing is the particular wisdom of the bodhisattva way, which is a recognition of our interrelatedness, that I am not separate from you. And when you and I meet in that shared understanding, something flows. And you could say that that flow is an energy. And that energy, you know, just like in physics, you know, that energy, that potential difference, as it's sometimes called, the energy here and the energy there, you and I, that difference. Times, the flow, like current, becomes power. So we can't have that power without a real recognition, a real touching into our interrelatedness. And that's what this understanding or this wisdom really is. It's not random. And we can't fake it, which is kind of a relief. But we can enter it through the power of this song, of the cadence, of the rhythm, of the flow. And, you know, all of that would be well and good, but still, how does it help us, you know, in our time right now? And I think one of the ways it helps us is that, you know, these are difficult times. And there are a lot of times when our sense of values really feel challenged. And not just individually, but collectively. And there's actually a term for this, which is called moral injury. And it's a particular kind of suffering that we get into when the stakes are high and something doesn't go according to plan, and there's great harm that results, and we feel a tremendous conflict between what our espoused values are and how we behave or others behave, and we witness that. And there's a great pain, and there's also a great betrayal, an experience of a betrayal of trust, of meaning, of purpose. And it can bring up, you know, incredibly intense feelings like shame and grief and outrage and all kinds of stuff. And this is, you know, this is happening. This is happening in our hospitals in the wake of the pandemic, you know, and also in the ambulances, EMTs and doctors and nurses just encountering what they never imagined they would have to encounter, and decisions they would have to make about life and death, still in our public health crisis. And it's happening, you know, in our mass incarceration systems, of really looking at a culture of saying, well, we all have individual choice. But do we really? I mean, we do, but that's really related to the conditions in our society that actually limit choice and create the, you know, the pipeline that imprisons. So in just the last minute or so, I just want to say that this very week, I'm really newly inspired because I went to a one-day, very powerful conference called For the Healing of the Nation, Understanding Moral Injury in the Wake of the Pandemic. And there I learned about incredible organizations and efforts, very wide spectrum, to actually engage all these different cultures and contexts, some of which I just named. And one of the organizations I learned about is called GRIP, which I believe stands for Guiding Rage into Power, works with the incarcerated and formerly incarcerated at San Quentin, which is out here in the Bay Area. And one of the remarkable things, first of all, I love the name, right? That they talked about is really recontextualizing this thing around individual choice and collective choices, and moving from shame to genuine remorse to restorative justice. And I was really encouraged by the recontextualizing of rage. There's even a term, moral outrage, right? And who hasn't felt it these days, right? So in closing, I just want to invite you, one more time, just to see if it's possible right now, just to see, is there somewhere that's got tension for you, a kind of live tension. And even if you're just imagining it, to imagine the power in that, like, almost like you're harnessing it. And it's got a momentum. And now, just imagine each of us has that. It is really bringing that forward. And that when you move in the world, you have all that power to work with. And to remember, to remind one another, as we do every time we show up here, in silence as well as in speech, that is a particular power, the power of the bodhisattva, the awakening being, to express that wisdom, that heart of understanding, that we belong to each other. And because we belong to each other, we naturally not only have a responsibility, but we actually bring that forward. So you don't have to work so hard. You just have to keep showing up. We just keep showing up. And it, that marvelous it, comes forth. What a relief, what a blessing, as it is to see you all and continue.